Hi everyone, sorry in advance for the subpar audio quality on this episode. I have a new recording setup and still need to iron out the kinks. The volume levels on the recording turned out way too low for some reason, which means the audio sometimes cuts off early and generally the sound is not great yet. To make things worse, John's neighbor decided to go full hog on his house with his power washer just when we started to record our review of Delicious in Dungeon, so we also had to deal with that. Hope you enjoy the episode regardless, and we'll try to be back to our normal recording quality in a couple of episodes. Anyway, enough apologies. Let's start the actual show! Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are your deliciously monstrous hosts.
I am John.
And I'm CC, and when there's just too much cool anime to watch, we've got you covered. Today we prepared a truly gigantic feast for you. First, I will review the new shonen monster mega hit from Production IG, Kaiju No.8. Then John will join me to discuss Studio Trigger's tasty fresh fantasy series, Delicious in Dungeon. It's our season finale. Of course, we will give you our picks for best anime of the season. For all of that, let us throw a couple of fastballs your way in the quick and the dead. Grab your kaiju slaying weapon of choice, put out the fancy china because we'll be cooking. Definitely don't pause the pod. We'll be right back.
They try to hit you. They try to get down and out.
So the quick and the dead time, huh? I don't know. I feel like there were a decent number of things that I've watched that I don't want to dive too deeply into, so I'm just gonna keep it down to like 3 this time that I feel like were the most important to me. So Data Live it's finished. It's done and dusted. I can't believe it took this long to get here.
That is neat.
Oh boy, it had some weird steps along the way, and even within the 5th and final season, they kind of leaned a little bit on the CG in some points that wasn't too great. But on the whole, I feel like seasons 4 and 5 were so much better than when JC staff jumped in and took over. Because, boy, remember when they had an episode where they tried to create an entire volume of the light novel into 23 minutes? And I complained about that then, and I'm still salty about that. But 4 and 5, they definitely they handed out to Studio Geek Toys. We talked about them a little bit. I talked about them a little bit before. And boy, they really knocked it out super hard. So I'm glad that they kind of were able to bring it full circle. We got the good ending. There's a couple of video games I still want to read through. The one it just came out, I think, as of this recording, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So there is still stuff to check out if I want my Data Live fix. But the anime was really good. In the end, when all was said and done, and I'm glad I stuck it out.
Hear that? I mean, you were looking forward to it, so it's like, will this pan out as John expected to and wanted to, but apparently it did, so that's good.
Well, I still was a big fan of how they teased the coming of the final season. I think I said this before, but after the end, what they were doing was they were putting the episode titles at the end of the episode in season 4. And at the end of season 4, they put Data Live 5, and it was like, oh, okay, all right, cool. I like that. That's a good way of doing that. So, and they got it. They did it. So I'm glad for that.
Cool.
Guess I'll sandwich in here something I enjoyed, but still wasn't super all about, and that was Laid Back Camp 3. which is a show and characters I still really enjoy, but it wasn't. This went through a studio change,
Hmm.
and it wasn't bad. But and I said this before. This was handled by, I believe it was 8-bit, and they have a thing with their backgrounds where they just kind of paint over photographs, and you can tell, and it was like a little distracting from time to time. The character designs are a little bit different, which that doesn't bother me as much. It was like, oh, they look a bit different. What's going on here? All right, sure. Changing the character designs, I feel like that I was able to push aside, but they kind of shifted direction a bit from being, comfy like it was to being more goofy. And, there was that in the past because, the characters are all just a bunch of silly goobers, and I really like all of them, but I don't know if it worked as well. But, it was still, the core of it was still there, so it was still fine for what it was, I guess, but it wasn't quite what the crew at Sea Station were laying down when they were still working on it. But they've gone on to start working on other things, so all I can say is good for them. But the last thing I'll talk about is, and I guess it will kind of lead into something that I'm interested in watching starting next season, and that's Urusei Yatsura. Uh, I don't know about you. I definitely never watched the original adaptation,
No,
but
me neither.
I guess from everything that's gone around, it was kind of a mess, and this was a bit more faithful. Which, David Production is pretty good at sticking to the script, but still making things fun to watch. So I'm actually really glad that I checked this out because this was something that, just I knew always sort of existed. And I was like, I've seen some of Takahashi's other stuff. I watched a little bit of Yasha when it was on God, was it on Toonami or Adult Swim or both? I don't remember. I watched a little bit of that. I was like, yeah, this is neat, but and then I kind of fell off it. So it's something that was a little more. This was definitely a lot more silly. That, but it was fun, and I really liked seeing the story between Ataru and Lum and seeing that play out. And I guess Lum was the girl for a lot of people back in the day, and she's cute here, and I'm sure she was cute back then. And I'm not quite sure what to say beyond that, but it was a silly good time, and I think the next show in the Takahashi line to hit is Ranma half.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm curious to see what happens with that adaptation.
I
So
wonder how well that has actually aged, just in terms of the jokes and everything. People
uh,
being a bit more aware of, the whole topic of maybe being trans and everything, which, doesn't necessarily fit with Ranma half, but, because it's still something different, because it's a curse and not, a decision that Ranma makes. But, there's some things that are here that are an underlying factor here, and I wonder how well that has aged. And they're definitely going to tone down the nudity. That much I know. That much is already evident in the trailer, because the old series was Ranma throwing their tits around every other episode. So, goddamn, that's gonna be severely toned down.
oh yeah, for sure. I just the old probably doesn't hold up. So hope maybe this will. So guess we'll find out.
I don't know.
So
For the old Urusei Yatsura show, I think that has still a lot of its fans, because that was more Mamoru Oshie's baby than the TV series adaptation anyway. Than it was maybe Rumiko Takahashi's, and that's why they're also now doing it. Did the reworked version that is more closer to the manga, and that's why it differs itself quite a lot from the old adaptation. But I think there's still a lot of people who prefer the old adaptation. I don't know if that will be the case with Ranma. We'll see. I don't know. I watched it when it came on German TV over here when it was released. I mentioned this before when they did oh no, we're gonna show anime at prime time. We're gonna make this adult thing. And the first series they chose was Dragon Ball Z. Fair enough. The second series they chose was fucking Ranma.
What a choice!
What a combination! What a double feature!
Jesus.
So it's anime, so everything it has tits, so it must be for adults. Maybe they were like it's a sitcom, so it fits in here. I don't know, but still weird. It was a weird double feature of having Dragon Ball Z and Ranma half airing next to each other in the evening on German TV for a while there. So it didn't last long.
And I think we touched on it, but that crazy BBC dub, man.
Yeah.
Oh man,
definitely crazy shit. Yeah, we'll see. It's gonna be fun, probably. I'm not gonna check it out because I was like on the old show, and it was like, okay, this is. I just don't really vibe with Rumiko Takahashi's humor. I think that much because it's pretty much always the same antics and fun. I mean, I see the attraction and everything. If you're into that kind of humor, but for me, it doesn't do really anything. And in Inuyasha, when it was brought up, mostly annoyed me, and I mostly was there for the action. It's not my brand of humor, I think. So some of the slapstick is good.
I guess I'm just curious about it more from a quote-unquote academic standpoint.
Yeah,
just because I want to see what it's about.
Yeah, and it definitely has its fun parts. It always had, like, the old version too, and I assume the new version. But there's some jokes in there that are just so very classic Rumiko Takahashi sitcom stuff where I'm like, that is just not for me. And, that's why I'm not going to check it out myself, but I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about it eventually.
Yeah, well, I'll see. I will see what goes on.
Okay. I didn't really check anything. I had a lot of shows that I wanted to watch besides the ones that we reviewed this season, which was a very light season for us with only 2 episodes. But, I want to check out Go Loser Ranger. I want to check out what else there was, Grim Variations, and one other show that I looked, Ninja Kamui, maybe that was last season. I'm not even sure. But yeah, I think I didn't get to any of those. It was just, it's a somewhat hectic time in my life right now. I know I don't need to apologize for this because this is our podcast. We can do whatever the fuck we want. And we will review what we review, and what we don't review, we don't review. But still, it's like, okay, it's just a bit of a lighter output from me for the past couple of seasons, I guess. But there's going to be more in next season, probably, and the one after that. We'll see. There are a lot of interesting shows on the horizon. I might pick up some of the shows that I didn't actually get to this season, that are from this season, and throw them in the Quick and the Dead, or do a full review when their next season, if their next seasons come out. I think for some of them they've already been announced. I think. So we'll see. Some of them will maybe find their way into the Quick and the Dead, because Quick and the Dead is free game, can throw everything in there that we want, and from whichever season we want, and even from years back. But
I mean, look at me. I threw Uma Musume in there a few seasons ago because screw it, why not?
So if I'm interested in any of the shows that are still there that I haven't gotten to yet, I will probably check out. I finished one show, but that I want to make that a full review eventually at some point, maybe with a friend of ours, and that's the. I talked about it in a preview, Quick in the Dead, of starting it again, and that was the 2003 version of Hunter x Hunter. No, 2011. I finished that. Still love it. I don't know if I want to do a full single-only review. I feel like the series merits a full review because it's just so goddamn good. But I want to have someone to throw my thoughts at who has watched it. So if I can't do that, I probably won't do that. And I instead refer to our dear listeners to the podcast I mentioned before, Media Club Plus, who are going through the entire series in like 3 to 4 episode batches an episode. That is very interesting, and they have some interesting insights and background stuff that they can talk about. So if you're hungering for Hunter x Hunter content and reviews, that's your podcast to go right now. But eventually, maybe I'll also give my 2 cents on it.
I mean, I started to watch the 2011 Hunter x Hunter during... Okay. So, back during the height of the pandemic and when I was still working in retail, we had a TV set up in the back room, and one of the people there was super all about it, and they were like, let's watch Hunter x Hunter. And I started watching it, and I couldn't get over over what an offensively good boy Gon was.
Well,
And I
that
was just like, oh my god, this character is like,
he's good to a fault, and trust me, that comes back. The series knows this and comes back to this, and kind of turns this on its head without spoiling too much in several ways. So maybe,
maybe I'll try going back to it eventually,
let's
but
see.
I won't make you any promises. I already said I try and watch One Piece, and I'm still sitting at the same spot I was before, and I'm only falling further behind.
Hunter x Hunter is a shorter time investment, though. It's still a long show, don't get me wrong, but it's much fewer episodes than One Piece.
It's what, 110 something episodes compared to 1,110?
Yeah. Yes, something like that. Let me check. Hunter x Hunter has 148 episodes. So that's still a big batch, and there's like one arc that takes up most of it. But it's still like less than 1,100, like you said. So
yeah,
again, nobody forcing nobody to watch it, just saying it's one of the best shonen shows period out there, in my opinion. And even though it's not finished, and I don't know if it ever will be, given the health problems that the creator Togashi has. But this series starts and ends with a very solid point in the story, where it's like, I can see this being the entire story. It's fine the way it is. I know there's probably still something coming after that, but I'm good with it ending here, because it feels like a complete arc for at least two of our main characters. So that's more than we get in a lot of other anime that are cut short, right? Especially in the adaptation field. So, yeah, I can definitely recommend the 2011 version. It's not perfect. Like, there are some issues there. Like, they're cutting out an important character out of the first episode of it that comes back later. And I feel like if they had included that, like they did in the old adaptation, and like it is in the manga, it would have felt more resonant when that character comes back, and his role, the role he takes in the story and everything. And for some reason, they did the same thing they did with Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, where they're like, no, we already had this part of the story, we need to rush the fuck through it. The thought from that is that some of the moments in the new adaptation are a bit less resonant than they were in the old adaptation or in the manga, because they decided to rush through some of it very quickly. So that's the biggest problem the new adaptation has, but it's tolerable. So yeah, and there's so many plus points in regards to it's a lot better pacing and animation quality in certain parts, and it covers more of the story than the old adaptation. But yeah,
I will say the other thing I know for sure is that Departure is a pretty good song. Yeah,
and it's nice how they always evolve on that and always change the opening, but the song technically stays the same. So it does one of the things we like to see in anime, where they change the opening around to match the series, but they also do something with the song and everything, and yes, it is super catchy. And I think I don't have sang the final lines in an anime OP as much as I do have done with Hunter x Hunter. It's like just because it's such a good bam at the episode starts moment. Also in terms of what the lyrics say and everything. So yeah, great show, fantastic show. Right now I won't talk more about it, but I recommend everyone who is remotely into shonen action series, into adventure series, into cool monsters, worlds, cool characters, whatever, cool power system, really intricate power system. Jesus.
Yeah, I hear Nen is a lot.
Nen is a whole damn lot, yes. And it gets more and more lot the further the series progresses. But that also makes it very entertaining, because there's like a lot of interesting shit done with it. It's not just a simple like, that guy is much stronger now and everything. It's the way the many facets Nen takes and many forms and variations is really, really interesting. So yeah. Check that definitely out, everyone. And the other show I'm still watching, I haven't watched an episode in a month or something, but I plan on picking it up again, is the 2003, that's 2003, I think, version of Astro Boy. So watching that, loving that show. It's fantastic. I'm so glad there are finally good subs for it available. I was so blown away by the first episode and how fucking good it looks. The production values on this show are nuts for a TV show. I did not see that coming. I fucking love it, and I definitely will talk about it eventually. That's an even shorter show, John. So if you want to watch an oldie but goodie, maybe pick that one up.
That is one that I've wanted to watch for a while. I would like to get on that.
It's also one of those shows where it's like, yes, there are some plot threads that are continuing, but it's one of those, hey, you can watch one episode, just randomly after work or whatever, because it's just a mostly closed off story and everything, and it's very old school. It feels very Saturday afternoon show, cartoon, but just with incredible production values and just cool designs, like really modernized but still classic Tezuka designs and everything. It's just a fantastic looking show and really fun. Really goddamn fun.
I feel like it's weird for me to say I've wanted to watch it for so long, but I feel familiar with it because of the Treasure game on the Game Boy Advance pulled a lot from it for its character designs and inspiration.
So I've heard, yeah. I still need to check out.
It's a good game. There's a lot to it, actually.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, definitely gonna check that out eventually. And everyone else, if you can get your hands on it, check out the Astro Boy 2003 version. After Pluto, I was like, I finally need to pull the trigger on this because I enjoyed the anime adaptation of Pluto so much, and I want to know even more about this universe than I picked up through osmosis. And I mean, for everyone who doesn't know, Astro Boy is the little head icon in our podcast's, logo. So I mean, it feels kind of like a crime that I haven't checked that version of that anime out yet. So,
I mean, we have touched on Astro Boy
yes.
here and there, with Pluto and Adam the Beginning, and some
absolutely.
other stuff. So we're there. We're there.
Yes, absolutely. We have covered it in review form, but I feel like this is a classic incarnation, even though slightly modernized because it's not the 80s or when was the original show? The 60s?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, version. But I was like, okay, I want modern sensibilities and modern production values, but I want to have still the old school designs. This seems like the best middle ground for that. And even though a lot of people are favoring the 80s version, but yeah, I still, I'm going to keep on watching this. I'm looking forward to getting back to it. And, yeah, everyone wants to watch along, try to find it, try to seek it out. It's out there. It exists now as a good sub. And yeah, definitely recommending that, even though I... All right, and with that, I think we're done with the quick and the dead, and we're gonna move over to our penultimate review. Then, Kaiju No.8. After the destruction of their hometown, childhood friends Kafka Hibino and Mina Ashiro make a pact to become officers in the Defense Force, a militarized organization tasked with protecting Japan from colossal monsters known as Kaiju. Decades later, the 32-year-old Kafka has all but given up on his dreams of heroism. Instead, he cleans up the remains of the slaughtered Kaiju after they are defeated by valiant soldiers, including Mina, who has successfully achieved their shared goal. Upon meeting his new co-worker, Reino Ichikawa, Kafka faces a mirror of his past self. An ambitious young man whose one desire is to fight as a member of the Defense Force. Unfortunately, the two are soon involved in a freak encounter with a rogue Kaiju. Though Kafka demonstrates his innate heroic nature and rescues Reno from certain doom, he is left gravely injured. While both men recover in a hospital, Kafka is seemingly attacked by another one of the beasts. As a result, he gains the ability to transform into a humanoid Kaiju with the strength and powers of the massive monsters menacing Japan. Dubbed Kaiju No.8 by the military, Kafka resolves to use his newfound gifts for the greater good. Tied together by mutual respect, Kafka and Reino set out to join the warriors of the Defense Force. A true balancing act, because the one person tasked with destroying Kaiju No.8 none other than the superstar of the Defense Force and Kafka's childhood friend, Mina. So yeah, Kaiju number 8 is based on a manga by Naoya Matsumoto, which started in July 2020, counts 13 volumes and is still running. There's also a light novel and 2 spin-off manga. The anime, as already mentioned in the intro to this episode, was produced by Production IG, which we of course have mentioned many times on this show. Ghost in the Shell, Psycho Pass, Haikyuu, and a lot of helping hands to wit on most of Attack on Titan stuff and many other high-profile shows in their storied vita. The first season of their adaptation of Kaiju number 8 counts 12 episodes and was directed by 2 people, Shigeyuki Miya and Tomomi Kamiya. The former also was a director on Bloodlet, Buzzer Beaters, some Lupin stuff, Unihei, Supernatural anime, and did key animation and storyboards for shows like High School of the Dead and Bleach. The latter has mostly been working as an animation and episode director before this, for example, Detective Conan, aka Case Closed, Carol on Tuesday, Jujutsu Kaisen, Psycho Pass, Cabaneri of the Iron Fortress, among other things. The adapted screenplay was written by our favorite madman, Ichiro Okuchi, who can be sometimes hit or miss, especially when he's doing original work. Every Code Geass and Devilman Crybaby, you get a Valve Rave. For every Skate the Infinity and Witch from Mercury, you get a Guilty Crown. But his adapted stuff is usually solid, and same applies here. I haven't read the manga, but the anime adaptation of Kaiju number 8 is all around handled really well. You got big, booming, incredibly well-staged action scenes, mind-blowing fights with riveting choreography, but also tender character moments and a lot of really well-edited comedy. This show is a lot funnier than I expected with this Attack on Titan light-ish setup. And I don't know if the style of comedy just worked really well for me personally, but I was laughing a lot. Mostly because of our incredibly relatable main character, but in general, the writing, direction, and timing of the jokes was pulled off just as effectively as the action scenes, in my opinion. Most of it is delivered in the first half of the series, since things get a bit more serious in the second half, but it was very welcome regardless and made the moments where the moment where the show shifts gears at the halfway point even more effective. All of this is underscored really well by Yuta Bando's pulse-pounding soundtrack, who, aside from this, has only done music for movies so far. Bell, the newest Mamoru Hosoda movie, Shin Ultraman, Children of the Sea, Propel of Chimney Town, all films. Kaiju number 8 seems to be his first TV show soundtrack. And Bando is mostly going for electronic/industrial stuff here, with some occasional vocals thrown into the mix. But he also delivers some really effectful, moody tracks that build anticipation and atmosphere really well. Definitely not the genre of soundtrack I expected, considering the composer's output so far, especially his work on the Bell soundtrack. I expected more of a grandiose orchestral score. But what he created here works really well for the sci-fi look and feel of Kaiju number 8. Dug it quite a lot. Maybe it doesn't work as well as a standalone listen, but as a companion piece to the visuals, it packs quite a punch. So yeah. What is Kaiju number 8 about? I gave the inside scoop already in the little opening narration for this review, but there are a lot of kaiju attacks in Japan. I mean, not only in this show, but, just in general. It's a thing. It is well known.
Okay. All right.
Not in the real world, maybe, but in media space, John, you kind of can't escape it. Especially since Hollywood has vastly adapted, even beyond stuff like, Godzilla and things like that. But we also had Pacific Rim, and I feel like Giant and Cloverfield. So I feel like kaiju are kind of a thing now. Also, with that name, not any giant monsters anymore. Everyone is now calling them kaiju because Pacific Rim kind of established that in the Western sphere. And yeah, this is what this show is about. Like, kaiju attacks are so normal in the world of the show by now that people seem to be at least partially pretty chill about it if they are not directly in affected areas. Like in the first episode, you see a kaiju alarm and everyone is looking at their phones. We'll see if the defense force will show up, which is kind of like, has like this kind of pop star air about it, like superheroes, right? The Avengers are showing up, everyone is hyped about it, and everyone is looking at the phones and want to see some recordings of the action. So it feels, in the beginning, it feels like a bit more low key. It was like, oh, there's another kaiju attack. Well, everybody get out of here and wait for the defense force. So in the beginning, it feels like they got this nailed down, right? They're the big superhero, but they got it under control. Like there's danger there, and towns get very often demolished, but not many people maybe get lose their lives or whatever, because this has now become if not daily, maybe weekly or monthly occurrence, and the defense force is usually prepared. But what happens once the defense force leaves, has successfully completed their mission and has destroyed the kaiju? Well, that's when our hero Kafka drops on the scene with his crew, because he's part of the cleanup crew. They get rid of corpses, they clean the buildings, they collect samples. All that comes with its own problems. Acidic kaiju blood, shit-filled intestines. Like there's, of course, a joke in the first episode that's all about the poo-poo stuff. Where someone cuts up the kaiju at the wrong place and gets burnt by acid, and then also, I don't know how it happens, but I think Kafka is relegated once more to cutting up the intestines, and there is pixelated shit flying everywhere. And apparently it smells really bad, which I can only imagine. But yeah, it's really hard work, and unlike the actual hunters that caused this mess, first and foremost, the third division, which are kind of like these big superstars, and Mina at the front there, his Kafka's old childhood friend, but they're like the best equipped and the ones that go most wild when they fight kaiju, apparently. But unlike them, the cleanup crew is not really thanked for it. But Kafka's doing his job. He's good at it. He's really good. He knows what he's doing. He's a 30-something guy. He's, advanced age, whatever. At least in anime terms.
Come on, man.
But, he's there. And immediately, of course, because of him not having the typical shonen hero age, right? He's not in his teens or in his very early 20s.
He's not at the prime young age of 16.
Yeah. He's instantly relatable to both of us. I would say you have watched the show, but trust me, if you see Kafka, you're like, oh yeah, I get that guy. Totally get him. And that was the thing for me. It's like I saw him, was like, oh, he's immediately so fucking relatable. And he's also very sympathetic. He's a super good guy, right? Like, not to a fault, what you were talking about with Gon in in our Quick and Death thing. He's good to his colleagues. He knows what he's doing. He's putting the work in. He's a bit of a goof, a bit of a big goof that only gets even worse when he gets his kaiju powers, because he doesn't know how to control them and gets really funny. But, he doesn't have it all figured out. He's still trying, to do it. And he isn't at the place where he wants to be right now. He wanted to be with his childhood friend, with Mina, and fighting the kaiju in the defense force, but it didn't pan out. He is 32 now, and he now wanting to join the defense force, which happens when he runs into Reno, is kind of like his last chance. I think they increased the cutoff age to get more recruits. But, this would be his last chance for now to get into it. I think this is the cutoff age, and with 33, he didn't have another chance. But at the point we meet him, he has kind of given up on it because he has tried the exam, I don't know, at least once, I think several times, and failed several times. And he's given up. He's like, I didn't cut it. I'm not gonna cut it. So I might as well give up, right?
That's a mood.
Yeah, that's a mood. And he's resigned himself to at least tangentially or in a way supporting the defense force by being part of the cleanup crew, which is nice, right? He could have gone into a completely different field, but you see, his heart is still there. Like, he wants to do something even remotely to support his country to fighting the kaiju, right? If it's only cleaning up the shit. So that's where we meet him at the beginning of the show. That's where he is. He's, part of the cleanup crew, still wants to be in defense force technically, but has given up for now. And then Reino Ichikawa joins the cleanup crew as an intern. And he, much younger than Kafka, of course, calls him senpai pretty much the entirety of the show. He wants to join. He can still join the defense force. He's very ambitious. He comes across a bit cold in the beginning, but him and Kafka hit it off pretty quickly and become kind of besties in a way. This immediately becomes a buddy cop show. at that moment, right? Because they're also like in cahoots. Once Kafka gets transformed into a kaiju by this weird mosquito kaiju thing that apparently just hijacks him, and then first only transforms him, gives him the ability to transform into a kaiju, but later has another effect that I won't go into because it's spoilers. But that happens, and then and Reno is the first one who witnessed that and who realized there's still Kafka under there, and then it becomes all about him knowing it and both of them trying to hiding it while trying to get into the defense force. Which, of course, is as funny as it sounds, right? Because there's a lot of dumb shit happening. And a lot of them trying to bend around themselves to keeping people from finding out that Kafka is a kaiju, at least for a long time of the first season. And yeah, a lot of humor derived from that. And yeah, he's the one, of course, who gets Kafka trying out again for the defense force. Especially after he got the kaiju powers and everything, and Kafka feels now he has a chance to supporting his friend, maybe eventually catching up to Mina. Although he's not entirely relying on his kaiju powers. In the first couple of exams, he's trying to do it with his own body strength, right? Because he doesn't want to cheat. He's an honest guy, and he's like, no, I want to do it with my own power. And makes almost last place in the fitness exam. Because as we all know, with 30, your body is basically dead. Wait until you get to 40, dear anime watchers.
Yeah.
Not to speak of 43. Anyway, so yeah, he has a bad fitness level and can't draw out the suit's power successfully in the beginning. The contestants, the people who are trying to get in the defense force, or the defense force members in general, have like these power suits that they're wearing. Maybe if you've watched Guns, they kind of look a bit like that. Who increase their power output. They can only be used at a maximum, a limited amount of time. Otherwise, they will do serious harm to your body. But in general, they protect you a bit. They give you more power and everything. But you need to be able to draw out the power out of these suits. And Kafka is just not able to do that in the beginning. But since he has been disposing of kaiju corpses for a long time, he knows a lot about their strength and weaknesses, which gives him a bit of an advantage, especially when they get to actually fight in the kaiju in the training exercises. And then it's not only about the actual, fitness and performance numbers, but also what does the person actually do in the combat scenario. And then Kafka's like, no, don't attack the kaiju from the front, but from the side, from that angle and so on, because that's where their weak point is. Because he knows, because he's dissected a lot of kaiju during his work in the cleanup crew, and his superiors noticed that pretty quickly. Foremost of them is the vice captain, Soshiro Hoshino, who's Mina's right-hand man. And he then decides to take Kafka under his wing as a cadet and train him. He says he's doing it because Kafka showed some strategic expertise and real team spirit in the trials, and also because he thinks Kafka's antics are hilarious. Because he sticks out. He's the old man in a field of a lot of young contenders and applicants, and he's always like, this old man is so hilarious, and so it's really fun. And the other characters say this too. Like, everyone likes Kafka immediately because he's just an old goof. And what he keeps to himself is that he already is suspecting something is up with Kafka, and that he might be related to a strong kaiju appearing during the trials. So immediately we have somewhat supporter, but also maybe somewhat danger to Kafka on the plan here. Not to speak of Mina, of course, because her official task is to find Kaiju No.8 and destroy it. But yeah, Soshiro is like kind of the mentor character to Kafka, but also a rival, right? Something to aspire to and maybe eventually overtake. And Soshiro at some point tells Kafka he shouldn't get too attached to the other team members, since anyone can die during the missions. So he's like also taking care that maybe Kafka doesn't get too invested, because he seems a bit naive and, optimistic in certain parts. And Soshiro is more the sober, I have seen shit type, right? we'll see how grim the show still gets in future seasons. It isn't there really yet. There's some dark parts in this season, but all things considered, this is much more lighthearted than I expected it to be in its first season. I expected something on the tone of Attack on Titan. This is not that. It's got a lot of similarities with the giant monsters and everything, but it's definitely not there in terms of, everything in hope is hopeless and everyone is dying left and right. That's not the case. It's definitely more of a fun time than Attack on Titan is in terms of. There's also a fight happening later in the season that Kafka and Soshiro are both involved in, which is probably one of the standout fights in the show. So it's just looking fantastic. It's super quick. It's super fun. Looks really good. Great choreography and everything. Because, Soshiro has everyone is kind of using guns and everything, mostly except for Mina's using a giant ass tank gun and a giant tiger. She has a pet tiger. That's the whole setup for the story, actually. Her cat got killed when Kaiju attacked their village, and that had her so distraught that to cheer her up, Kafka said, hey, let's make a vow right here and now. We're gonna join the defense force and defeat the kaiju who did this to your cat. So, right, that's the setup. And of course, because she likes cat, when she is grown up and is fucking superhero, she of course has a pet fucking tiger who helps her kill kaiju with his badass. So
that checks out.
That tracks. That's very anime, and I fucking love it. But yeah, most of the other characters I feel like are using guns and everything. Kafka also, of course, using his kaiju powers, but Soshiro is usually using two short swords because he's the ninja type character. He's super fast, super quick. He's a melee fighter, and he was only ever told that his weapons are outdated and he should give up wanting to join the defense force. His family is very much, traditional sword fighters, whatever. I think with kendo and everything. But Mina told him she needs a close quarter specialist on her team that can clear the way for her so she can unload her enormous gun. So that's why they work so well together. And that's why he's kind of an outlier in terms of combat expertise. The other big melee fighter is Hikaru, which is probably either the third or the fourth most important character in this first season. She's one of the applicants, one of the people who joined the defense force in the same class that Kafka and Reno are trying to join it. It's going through the same trials and everything. And in the beginning, she comes off as this super snobbish, I'm the best there is, two pigtails, whatever, and blonde, and super snobby attitude. And what is this old guy doing here? Get him out of here! Fuck this guy! And God, you're so useless. And it feels a bit bitchy in the beginning. But she can back it up because she's super strong. She's like the daughter of one of the top kaiju weapons manufacturer, I think. Also, the main manufacturer of the power suits, I think. So she's super well trained with and knows how to use her power suit thing. Can draw out the power super well. She knows how to effectively use weapons and everything. She has trained from the earliest moments on. But she definitely has daddy issues, because her father always expected her to get perfect results and never rewarded her with affection for achievements. He even puts pressure on her by telling her to do it for her dead mom.
Oh, man.
Typical asshole anime dad. So finally getting that affection must be the thing that pushes her to be as good as she is, but of course also makes her short-sighted, narrow-minded, and almost suicidal on the battlefield in certain situations. And then she runs into Kafka and doesn't know what to make of that guy. And that's a bit of a spoiler, but he eventually transforms in front of her due to a situation to protect her. And thankfully, she doesn't rat him out, so she immediately becomes one of the most important characters in the show, because together with Reno, she's like the one person that tries to still hide Kafka's secret. And they immediately become also kind of friends. And, there's definitely a rivalry and love interest thing developing between her and Kafka. At the point she knows that Kafka has kaiju power, she's even more intent of not being outdone by him. And like I said, she also becomes the third one of our core characters. And she recommends Kafka not letting everybody know that he's kaiju, because all kaiju are so powerful that they get a number, either get experimented on or just get killed and / or turned into a special weapon. Because that's also a thing that happens. Like, kaiju get killed and then turned into weapons that can be used against other kaiju. So that could be ultimately Kafka's fate if he reveals to everyone that he's a fucking kaiju now. So she doesn't want that to happen because she likes him eventually anyway, a lot, and believes in him and everything. So yeah, but that's an interesting dynamic. And her father also later comes back into the picture again because he's a really important character in the military and everything. And yeah, so that's something interesting that is set up for the coming seasons, I bet, especially their dynamic and, you know, our trio there of young cadets. And yeah, I liked all of these very much. In the beginning, it was like, Kiro, what's your deal? Why are you being so mean to everyone? But no, she's actually, I get it where she's coming from. And Reno, of course, is also there. He's more of a companion piece to Kafka and like straight man foil for Kafka to, you know, bounce his nonsense off of. And he has his hands full in the beginning of protecting Kafka's secret, of course. And they just have a very fun buddy cop dynamic. So it's really fun to see them on screen together. And he himself wants to get better at killing kaiju, so Kafka doesn't have to transform anymore because he wants to protect him and he considers him his senpai and so on. And that doesn't mean he could be like the perfect guy, and he's really good at fighting and everything, but he also is kind of a bit of a dumbass in certain situations. Like at one point, he almost gives away Kafka's secret. Thankfully, the guy he's talking to is an even bigger idiot. So that works out. But yeah. So as you can see, already a bunch of cool characters, but there are even more. Like a lot of other cadets in the entry exam. There's, you know, Haruichi Izumo, who's top of his class. He's also the heir to the Izumo Technologies, like, which is the largest anti-kaiju arms manufacturer in the country. So he will probably play a more important role down the road because there is an industry, there's money. Where there's money, there's greed. So considering a lot of his family's fortune hinges on kaiju still being a danger, we'll see what they do when the perspective on kaiju eventually maybe starts to shift due to Kafka. We'll see. So that's interesting. We also have Iharu Furuhashi, who is like this absolute powerhouse and kind of a dumbest but fun. Kikoro, of course. Aoi Kaguragi, who is like this rising star in the ground SDF. And we have Okonogi, who is the operator, like in the home base. And she's also featured heavily in the ED. She's this cute girl with glasses and everything sitting in front of your computer the entire time. And every one of the cadets from this, at least from this year, seems to have joined up because they were either saved or impressed / inspired by Mina. So everyone has like this, oh my god, she's the best. And then when they find out that Kafka and Mina were childhood friends... They are all suddenly very interested in Kafka. Speaking of rivalships earlier, there are definitely a lot going on in the show. You know, we have Kafka versus Kikoro, though that is more one-sided. We have Kafka versus Soshiro at some point, Reno versus Iharu, Haruichi versus Aoi. And yeah, like I said, eventually Kafka versus Soshiro, since Kafka needs to gun for the vice captain role if he really plans to eventually stand right next to Mina on the battlefield. So that's bound to happen. And yeah, some other fun characters. There's a platoon leader called Nakoshima who has like this cougar mode and is drooling over some of the young cadets.
Oh.
Yeah. But it's not too sleazy. It's a fun scene. And, you know, Iharu, who is the idiot that I mentioned before that Reno is talking to, who's like this ultimate, this big, or this powerhouse guy. He's driven by his will to protect others because Mina protected him, you know, one of the ones that were inspired. And of course, is also wants to stand next to her on the battlefield, so that could also lead to a rivalship between him and Kafka. Lots of interesting potential rivalries going on here in character relationships that might come up in future seasons. I can't talk much about Mina yet, aside from her being the main motivation of Kafka and the initial setup and everything. But in this season, she's mostly this elusive, stoic force in the background for, you know, most of the first half of the season, and only drops in with her big gun to do some massive damage to kaiju. She becomes more important in the back half. Again, aside from being Kafka's main motivation, of course. But talking about her character arc in the back half of the season would mean spoilers. So that's something I can bring up in the eventual season 2 review. But yeah, like I said, I didn't expect the show to be as much of a comedy as it is. Kafka and Reno rightfully freaking out about Kafka's transformation in the hospital is goddamn hilarious. And the escape scene after that from the hospital is even funnier. Also, yes, I get it. The guy's name is Kafka and he gets transformed into a kaiju by a bug. Which
I was going to say.
Already said in a sneak peek, that's a bit on the nose. Don't know if the author of the manga is a Franz Kafka fan or just read Die Verwandlung in high school, but either way, the show is wearing one of its inspirations on its sleeve. Let's say that much.
I was about to say there's no way they don't have, some level of awareness.
Pretty sure, yeah. So yeah, mostly comedy in the beginning, then it gets more serious once the trials are actually over and they actually have to fight the kaiju. There is another humanoid kaiju showing up. And that the person then, after causing a bit of havoc in the trials, then sticks around in a different form, hiding himself among the cleanup crew and everything. So the tension is immediately high. When will he show up again? And there's it. Let's just say the show escalates and escalates more during the course of the season. It's got a really good, solid escalation curve going on, with not much downtime. It's really, really quick pacing, but it doesn't feel rushed. Every character who needs to gets their amount of time that they need to for a decent development and everything. We got cool character moments, we got cool action. Everything is really well balanced. They also do sometimes, previously on Kaiju No.8 segment, I feel like that's pretty rare in anime. Someone actually saying previously on, That feels more something you would see in Western shows. But it happens in the show several times, and I was like, okay, interesting. And the show also got some really cozy vibes. The character interactions and the comedy do their part, but we also have like these neat moments. There's one where everyone gets together after the first mission for food and bickering like colleagues do or family, and that just brings the good vibes. Really good moment in the show, and moments like that are sprinkled in between, and I like them a lot. And yes, I said there is a strong comedy aspect to the show, but don't get me wrong, the focus is still very much on the action, especially in the second half of the show. And when the action hits, shit usually gets serious and very tense and very cool. And there are several pump the fist in the air moments, especially when Kafka is concerned and when he has like a dynamic last moment saving entry and so on. There's one especially in the second battle against the first other humanoid kaiju that shows up that is really, really cool. And where I was like, fuck yeah! That's how you do it, Kafka. That's how you do it. And the music does its part too, because that's one of the moments where one of the tracks with the vocals kicks in and everything. So the show knows what it's doing. The composer and the directors knows what they are doing with this, and it's really good stuff. And the action scenes just regularly deliver something on par with the best Attack on Titan has to offer in regard to small guys taking out big monsters battles, which makes sense, because Production IG also worked on Attack on Titan together with at least for some of the seasons. And the scenes involving Mina, Soshiro, Kikuro, and of course Kafka are the highlights here. Especially Soshiro being this high-speed two-bladed sword fighter is basically a guarantee for incredible action choreography with cool tracking shots and everything. So yeah, that's definitely something to look for and to enjoy. And yeah, not much more to say about this. Everything else would be spoilers, which I don't want to do, or heavy spoilers. I've spoiled a bit here and there, but not big things. So definitely, yeah. I love this show. I love this first season. I think it was fucking great. And it definitely catered to me specifically in more ways than one. Not just because I'm a big show nerd, but also, the age demographic of the main character and everything. But yeah, you can watch it on Crunchyroll in most countries, maybe Netflix and others. And you should definitely give it a look. This was for sure the show where I was looking forward to its episodes the most each week, because I loved all of the characters. The mystery was exciting of why Kafka actually is was getting transformed into a kaiju. Not that is solved yet, but it was still a strong hook for everything. and the action was riveting top to bottom. And that in a season that also featured My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer. So that is saying a lot. If it can contest with that. If you're in the mood for some big explosion punch fest with cool monsters and fun characters, definitely check this out.
Right. Well, giant monsters are fun, aren't they?
Yes. Small monsters too, though.
Yes, particularly those that may appear in a dungeon and may or may not be delicious.
Maybe not always delicious, but definitely edible.
True. Well, that is the idea behind Delicious in Dungeon.
Yes, it's not called edible in dungeon.
That's yes. Come on.
Or
come on.
dungeon meshy.
Yes. So, adventuring knight Laios Toden leads a small party through a seemingly endless dungeon, a subterranean maze full of dangerous monsters and precarious traps. Through the use of advanced magic, an explorer can sometimes be resurrected, allowing them to learn from past mistakes and give traversing the dungeon another go. However, when a powerful dragon eats Fallon, Laios' spellcasting sister, she sends her brother and his companions back to the beginning to save them from their permanent ends. Though strapped for cash and equipment, Laios resolves to fight his way through the dungeon and rescue Fallon before she can be digested by the dragon. Despite some of Laios' allies abandoning him, two remain by his side: Elven mage Marcel Donato and halfling locksmith Chilchuck Timms. Due to their lack of funds, the party faces the daunting prospect of starving before being able to complete their quest. However, they find salvation in Senshi, a dwarven warrior with a penchant for cooking and safely eating defeated monsters. With Senshi's culinary expertise, Laios and his companions struggle through the dungeon while learning about gourmet dining and each other along the way. Thank you to MAL Rewrite for that very succinct summary of Delicious in Dungeon.
Right, I forgot to mention that my intro summary for Kaiju No.8 was, of course, also from MAL Rewrite mostly. I added a little sentence at the end, but yeah.
So, this show was hyped up for a while, actually.
Yeah. I missed most of the hype, but once it dropped, I was like, oh, everyone is talking about this.
I just remember that I don't think I watched it, but I think there was like a short or some sort of commercial that they put out that they were really highlighting, being like, hey, this is the one to watch. You should go watch it. Check this out. There's a big marketing push for it. Apologies to our listeners for the sudden noise coming from outside. I guess I might as well say full disclosure that we're trying recording a new way and we're still working the bugs out of it.
Yeah. Systems change and we have to adapt. So, bumps me out a bit because I feel like with the last one or two recordings, I finally figured out our audio levels and now we had to redo it all over again. But it's fine. So we'll make it work.
But yeah, this is the new big Studio Trigger show. When did we talk about them last?
New Animal, probably?
That sounds right, yeah. So it's been a minute since since friends of the show Studio Trigger have been around. But yes. So getting all the credits out of the way first and foremost. This is based off a manga written by Ryoko Kui. Kui, like eating, with art by Naoki Takeda. Kui has a couple other things under their belt as well, none of which I'm really familiar with, so I don't know if it's worth listing off here. Takeda has done some art and character designs on, this is a pretty long list, but they've done some work on some other stuff, some other Trigger stuff like Dynazenon and Gridman, and a couple of and some work on Kill la Kill as well. So they have been around to do character designs. So
By the way, the last Trigger show we talked about was Cyberpunk Edge Runners.
That's it. I knew I was going to say BNA sounded right, but in my brain I was like,
And I think even after BNA we had Dynazenon, but I'm not quite sure. But I think so. Maybe.
Their name has passed through our mouths before. Yes.
Oh yeah, several times. They're just the high profile former Gainax staff studio, and they just recently reviewed a Transformer 30th anniversary or 40th anniversary video. I'm not sure.
40th anniversary. 40th. Jesus.
Yes, and that was also really cool. So Trigger always does cool stuff, and I feel like this is their most, in terms of looks and everything, for the most part, most conventional anime we've seen. Maybe.
Yeah. This is. I'd say that, yeah, there's still the little Trigger flair here and there,
course.
But
especially the action scenes.
They're definitely sort of helping to kick off. I feel like this fantasy anime renaissance, as it were, this is definitely, it's probably one of the better ones that I've watched in a long time. I'm not sure about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, just in terms of, it's working off on a manga, right? So they don't run into the trouble that they sometimes have with the writing on their original work. But in terms of just visual quality, looks great. In terms of writing, it's top notch. The story is super fun. So yeah, it could be definitely up there as one of their absolute best.
And the nice thing about this is a manga that has finished its run.
That is very good.
Because, kind of getting a little bit of myself here, but there's already confirmed to be a second season, so we know that there is the possibility that this story will be seen through to its ending.
Yeah, very glad to hear that. If Trigger makes a habit of that, like picking up manga adaptations of manga that are already finished, please go for it. I wouldn't mind that.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely here for it.
Some of their we've talked about their original works too, which are not all winners, but they at least see them through the end. There's some weird stuff in there, that's for sure. Like somehow the other night I was talking with some friends, and Darling in the Franxx and Kisniver came up, but I feel like those are two that you just push them off to the side. It's okay. They tried some stuff, and they.
That can be mostly attributed to the writing, right? Not necessarily, and bring some other writers in and whatever. And Darling in the Franxx was a co-op with A1, but not that I want to just absolve Trigger from any stupid decisions or whatever in the story department. Brand New Animal was entirely their thing, I think, with in-house writers and everything. And I was not. I liked that show to an extent, but there were some decisions that I absolutely could not make sense of. And I was like, what are you trying to say, show? What are you actually going for here? And, that, can sometimes happen. And Kill la Kill was fun, super fun, but also, the ending was not as great as it could have been. And the same applies to, what was the movie that we watched at New York Comic Con?
Promare.
Promare, right. Super fun movie, looks fantastic, but the ending, the very, very, very last minutes, it was like, what? That's what you're doing with it? Okay.
Yeah,
But that was also, I think, the same writer as Brand New Animal, so I think that seems to be just his problem. I don't know. But so there's some stuff in there that's a bit wonky, but Edge Runners was super fun and super well pulled off from beginning to end, and Gridman and Dynazenon are as well, so there's so much good stuff, and everything, at least that looks fantastic when Trigger puts their hands on it. So there's definitely that.
This show was directed by Yoshiro Miyajima, who has had hands on almost everything that Trigger has worked on, as far as I can see. And a couple of things I'll say, like they worked on a little bit of JoJo Part 4, excuse me. Uh, Apparently a little bit on SAO and some other stuff as well. So they have been around in more than one sense of the word.
Hmm.
Written by Kimiko Ueno, Nanami Higuchi, and Yu Sato, who have all worked on a whole bunch of stuff. The one of the people I didn't realize was involved with this show is that the music was composed by Yasunori Mitsuda.
Oh, really? I was not aware of
Yeah,
that either. Has
yeah,
Mitsuda done anime stuff before?
a little bit actually. He's done a bit of looking at his list of credits. Black Butler, Inazuma 11. And a couple other
Really?
things as well. So not like a super long list of anime credits, but yeah, he's done some.
Really interesting. I never picked up on any, because Mitsuda has a very, at least when it comes to the JRPG area, has a very easily discernible style, I would say. Like, you can pick up Mitsuda's music easily, at least from a certain time. I don't know about his newer stuff maybe, but everything that was around the Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, Xenogears, Xenosaga area. No, wait, Xenosaga. No, he did the first one. He did the first
Yeah,
episode one, right?
and then I think after that it was handed off to
Yuki Kajiura.
Yuki Kajiura. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can always pick out his soundtracks. It's like they have a very distinctive sound, just like Yuki Kajiura soundtracks have. But I never picked up on him doing any anime work. I was never like, oh, this is what the hell is this Mitsuda soundtrack? And I didn't for this anime either. So maybe he applies a different sounds design, whatever sounds composition tactic to anime compositions. I don't know.
Apparently he worked with someone named Shunsuke Tsuchiya, and I'm having trouble digging up a significant amount of their work. Okay. They have done a bunch of stuff since around 2005, according to VGMDB. So they have also been, so collaborative, blah blah blah. So it looks like the Tsuchiya must have worked alongside him on that game, Another Eden, and then did some stuff with the Chrono Cross 20th Anniversary Live Tour. So I guess they've been working together for a little bit.
Maybe it's a student.
That could be, yeah, like his understudy.
Yeah, right. Like Hans Zimmer had a lot of those in Hollywood, where it's like a lot of them just went in the beginning for the same-ish style. I think Harry Gregson Williams comes to mind, and who also then did soundtrack, the music for Metal Gear Solid, I think, if I remember correctly. And
yeah,
a lot of his stuff in the beginning sounds very Hans Zimmerish. So maybe it's the same thing for Mitsuda and the other composer on the show, that he's riding with him to pick up on his style and to learn from him. I don't know. Could be the case.
That's true. Could be.
Anyway, yes, fantastic soundtrack on this. Absolutely, I love the first OP for this show. By the way, I think there's just this very, very cozy, folky sound to it, and gets you hyped up for the episode. And the second one is okay, but I like the first one better. How do you feel about those?
I mean, I find it unendingly funny that they chose Bump of Chicken to do a song for a show called Delicious in Dungeons. So. But no, I do really like the first song a lot. The second one is, it's fine, but I sort of found myself going back to the first one a lot more often.
Yeah, same. Absolutely. I really like the first one, especially when it goes back to the instrumental at the end, and they have you see the characters sitting next to the fire, all sharing a meal and everything, and then in the background the choir goes, ha! It's really
that's great.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's cool. So yeah, definitely good music in this, very fantasy appropriate.
Guess we can talk about let's move into the characters a little bit.
Yes. Well, why don't we start with our main tall man,
Yes.
Laios? Speaking of tall men, like there are a lot of interesting races in this, right? And I wasn't sure who the normal humans are in this. I guess they're the tall men, but also they're special because they're actually, tall.
I mean, I just sort of assumed that tall men were human, and they were called as such, like in comparison to like halflings, like Chilchuk or half-foot.
Yeah, half-foot, right?
So, I just sort of assumed, that was this, but then that's weird because you have Senshi and he's just a dwarf.
Yes.
And, it's not like a special name that they came up with, but, obviously you don't always have to do that, but.
No, but yeah, it's maybe these other are also well known in some fantasy areas, maybe like Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. I don't know, but maybe they have been brought up again. But tall man, I never heard before. So it's like, okay, is he just a normal human and he's taller than a half-foot, so that's why they call him that, or what is going on? But I think like there's a humanoid race and there are some subclasses to that. One is tall man, maybe one is half-foot. I'm not sure.
No, I think it's just humans because Fallon is classified as a human. Marcel is, half elf, but you can also there's also the argument to me, she's also half tall man, tall woman.
Yes.
But yes, Laios. He likes food.
Yes, and not only the normal kind, or what you would deem as normal.
Well, I guess that's one step further in than where we should start. Laios has an interest in monsters and their biology. And, I feel like he makes a big show of it and he's sort of played up, not only for laughs, but, to show that it's Laios, your interest is a bit weird, my guy. But,
yes.
I feel like when you're trying to traverse something like this dungeon that we have seen that is filled with monsters, that it shouldn't be that irregular of an interest to take.
Maybe. I mean, he's an entrepreneur. Maybe he's a trailblazer. Who fucking knows? And just, considering how some of the monsters look, I would understand why people don't necessarily gravitate to the idea of, hey, can you eat that regularly? So, I mean, being interested in them absolutely makes sense. And I feel like there are other people who know stuff about the monsters. Maybe not as much as Liar or Senshi do, but there are enough characters that are interested in. But for him, he's a real monster otaku. Like, he's really, really into it, learning everything about them, sometimes to an unhealthy extent.
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yes, like he's a real fanboy, and that manifests itself him also wanting to consume monsters and trying to turn them into meals. And he will go to great lengths to try all the varieties that are available in this dungeon when it comes to monsters and weird creatures.
I mean, the idea is sort of brought up by necessity after basically we see the very first thing is Laios and company trying to fight the red dragon, and they almost get wiped, and Fallon, sends them all away. And when when the idea of resupplying comes up, he says, hey, I've got this old book that says that gives guidance on how you can prepare and eat different types of monsters. And granted, it is an old dusty book with out of date information and stuff that isn't 100% correct, but
yeah, Senshi corrects some of that.
If you got to start somewhere, I feel like Laios at least has the right idea, but It's
And I mean,
not.
it's not only that it's like, hey, now we have technically a food source, right? And we
Yeah.
don't need to spend money on that more than necessary. But also, we and the party learn a lot about monster behavior and anatomy, which will help our heroes in battles as well.
Mm.
Does, right? You know, for example, when Laios cuts up a mushroom, he realizes there's more resistance from the meat depending on the direction of the cut. So he realizes that they should cut those particular monsters vertically instead of horizontally or diagonally. So that's cool, right? That's helping in multiple ways. Not only because they can cook the mushroom afterwards, but also because they know an easier way to fight them and maybe not get wiped as quickly from certain monsters. Which, by the way, in this show is an interesting aspect that like parties regularly get full wiped, like they die completely, and then they get picked up by these corpse retrievers and then get revived and then need to pay for that revival. So there's a whole economy behind it and people trying to scam it, right? They're like some assholes that we meet later on that try to make a quick buck out of that. And so that's a whole thing in this show. Like people regularly die in battles, but they can get revived because of magic, because this is the thing in here that is actually talked about. And if they get revived before their body mass is completely gone, something for their soul to attach to, you know, they can go, they live again. It's actually one of the interesting lore bits that we learn about this dungeon that they're going into, that the curse has been cast on it that prevents things from permanently dying. At least it makes it a lot harder for the soul to actually detach itself from the body.
I thought it was something like that the soul binds to the dungeon, and that way it can't escape.
Yes, either the soul or the dungeon binds the soul to the body for a longer time. I don't remember exactly how it worked, but it was either of those two. And that makes it much easier to revive people inside the dungeon. There's also a big part when they would bring some of them out, the soul would immediately detach itself from the body, right? And then they would die as soon as they get out of the dungeon, so they need to get revived in the dungeon. So yeah, interesting, mechanics that are implemented here, and I like that a lot. And aside from the first thing that we meet where Fallon gets, consumed by the dragon, and it's the whole hook of the show, them trying to get back to the red dragon and trying to kill it and trying to get her out of its stomach and then revive her, hoping for there being left enough of her. So fucking gruesome to think about it. Her like being digested alive in the dragon.
When they first bring that up, it's like, that's something you would have to consider, huh?
But this is what they hope for. They're very matter of fact about it. There's like, well, we have to get to it in time so she doesn't get fully digested, then we can revive her. And it's like, okay, good to know that. And, those is the motivation for our main first three, Laios, Marcel, and Chilchuk. And then Senshi joins because he really, really wants to eat red dragon meat. That's his holy grail, his white whale, literally. And so that's why he joins the gang, and later just because, he sticks with them because he likes them and wants to help them save Fallon. And so, yeah, that was cool. But this death mechanic is ever present, and some parties definitely suffer more from it than ours. Like we have this kind of secondary party that it becomes more important later on. We got more other parties too that come across our party, but they die a lot. So.
Yeah, there's one party in particular.
Yes, Kabru's party. They just fucking get constantly wiped. And that also comes into play later on. But our party, not as much, because they have Senshi on the side, they have the book, and they know what to do. They know what to watch out for. After a while, they still get in trouble a lot, but they usually find a way out of it with, cleverness and, the knowledge resources they have at their hands. And then they cook the monsters they beat. Eat them.
Cook and eat.
Yeah. There's like you said, Laios is really doing the most things where like maybe dial it back a bit especially his teammates let him know that they are not on board with everything he's trying to do. And I totally get that, especially from Marcile's point of view. Spoilers, she's my favorite character. But, he does stuff like letting himself get sucked into some living paintings to eat the food portrayed in them. Not a successful endeavor, but we learn a bit about the history of the kingdom through that, which is cool.
Yeah. The dungeons, the dungeon and the monsters themselves, there's so much world building in this show.
Yes.
And I get the feeling, I may or may not be wrong about this, but I get the feeling that Kui may be a fan of the Mystery Dungeon series of games.
Really? I've never played those.
So the original Mystery Dungeon game was a Dragon Quest spin-off, and the crux is that you were traversing a semi-randomly generated dungeon. Sometimes one character, sometimes you have a whole party, and you have to manage both your health as well as like a stamina thing. In some games it is called hunger, in some games it's not, but there's the idea there. So I look at that and I feel like there's a non-zero chance that there's some inspiration here, which I kind of like, that this is sort of like an extension of that idea into, like a fully fleshed out story. Because,
yes.
Obviously the dungeon in the games is part of it, but, this is definitely, I would hazard say probably the logical conclusion behind that sort of concept.
Yes, absolutely. But also in regards to lore, the show doesn't hit you over the head with it, right? It doesn't do giant lore expositions all the time, which would be the worst way to approach this.
Right. But, we still have enough breadcrumbs.
Yes, sprinkled in between.
Yes, to keep us going. Obviously, the main part of the story is a lot more character driven.
Yes, and that is also really good. Like, it's the opposite of the Souls games. So it's like lore everywhere, but no real narrative happening and no character motivation or whatever.
But you don't like reading every item description?
No.
Oh, come on.
I've come to like the gameplay of some of the Souls games, but I hate the way it approaches its story. I absolutely despise it. I just having everything like you having to seek everything out and every little bits and piece and having to read up on it on the internet to actually grasp what has been going on in the background. I'm here to have fun and not to fucking work, guys. Like, Jesus Christ, get an actual narrative writer for this shit.
I mean, I get that, but if you backtrace it to Kingsfield, it's better than it has been.
Yes, sure. And I guess one of them, was it Sekiro, actually had a narrative. I haven't played that yet, so maybe I will like that the most. But it's just like, I'm never emotionally invested in these games. Never. I just play them purely for the atmosphere, for the world, and for the gameplay. I don't care about anything that's happening in the story. Never. Because the game doesn't make me care.
Fair enough.
Never does. So that's a hang up I have with these games. With this show, never had that problem. Like you said, it sprinkles a lot of breadcrumbs in between where it's like, oh, we heard about this before, and now this becomes more important. And now we learn more about this little bit of lore that we heard before. And this is how it plays into the character development and the way the story progresses. And it's a perfect way to do it. It's a perfect way how you make people learn about interesting world building stuff while attaching it to the character development and to the actual main narrative. That the show is really, really good at that. Like the stuff with the paintings, right? There's some stuff we learn about the background of the kingdom that is the whole setup for this dungeon thing. And later on that becomes very important. A character we meet there in the paintings becomes very important. And it's like, hey, I've seen this before. I know what this is about. And I probably know what the character's motivation is because we've already seen that in this little bit of fun, goofy side thing where Lars just wants to eat food that is in the paintings. And, that stays in the background for a while. Then it gets brought up again. And, that's what this was about. And that's what all this is about. That's a perfect way to do it. That's amazing. And I think the writing, that's where the writing really shows its strength. Like combining this really effortlessly way of world building with the actual character stories and the main narrative. Just was really impressed by how the show handled that particular aspect.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't feel heavy-handed or anything.
No.
It just works.
And for the most part, like I said, there is a narrative there, but it's just very slowly picking up in the beginning. And that's also what I mostly expected from the show. I actually wasn't expecting to be enamored by its story so much by the end, but most of it in the beginning feels very slice of lifey, character driven. Hey, we learned a bit about the background of the characters, but not too much. And mostly it's about, hey, here's a new monster. How do we fucking cook it? How do we prepare a meal out of this? How do we use the things that appear in this dungeon to make a proper meal by the end of this episode? And that's mostly what it feels like in the first couple of episodes. And then slowly but surely, we learn more about the world. We learn more about the characters. We learn more about why they're here, why those characters are here, what's happening on the outside, why the dungeon exists, and so on and so on. And it's rarely an exposition dump that's happening on the side. We have some side conversations with other parties where we learn more about our party and stuff like that, where it's like a lot of talking, but also a lot of that is like red herrings, where it's like, what are you saying about our characters? That can't be true. No, it actually isn't true. It's just like only parts of that are true because it's hearsay, and they got some of the members from the other party got a wrong impression about our character because of previous encounters and misconceptions in general and preconceived notions. And so that's really interesting. And you have some classic tropes of, hey, elves and dwarves necessarily don't like each other, or elves and orcs don't necessarily like each other, but maybe it's because of a different reason. And, this gets progressed really well during the course of the show. And then, of course, you have all the goofy shit in between with Laios just freaking out over another monster he wants to eat. Like he would even eat a demi-human like a fishman if others allowed it. He's a menace. Laios is an absolute menace.
Yeah, but they kind of put the nix on that, so...
Well, in a way. But he does other weird stuff. Like, we have this character who joins the main gang very late in the show, Izutsu, who is like this new cat girl party member. Very brash, but, also very capable and competent and everything. And she just reluctantly joins the gang for a certain reason. And then she has to undress at a certain moment, is really nonchalant about it, to dry herself up and everything. And Laios immediately wants to count her nipples because she's a cat lady and wants to see how many she has because she's female. And just a menace, that guy. Just a goddamn menace. Is she like a cow? Is she like a cat? Is she like a human? There's only two? And it was like, get the fuck out of here, Laios. A menace, like I said.
Academic.
However, his intuition is not bad. Like, there's this episode with the shapeshifters, and he figures that out pretty well and quickly. John, did you figure out all the shapeshifters immediately?
No.
I mean, some of them are very, have very egregious design differences.
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple that were like, okay, all right. But then the rest was like,
maybe this one? I got it right at the end, but I was surprised how sure Laios was about all of this and with his deductions and everything. I didn't expect that from him, so that was nice.
He's more observant than we thought.
Yes, and of course he seems to really care for his sister and not in the bad anime way of caring for your sister. So that's a nice...
I'm glad for that.
Yeah, it's really a nice change of pace. And, so that works. And then he gets his little sword buddy and he names him Kensuke, of course. And, he's a big goof and he's very weird in certain parts. But the thing is, the show just, lets him...
The show lets him cook.
Lets him cook and lets him eat that regularly, like from other characters, where it's like, you're such a goddamn weirdo. Get out of here. Leave me alone.
I'm sure everyone who's interested in the show has seen the memes of Senshi as Walter White and Laios as Jesse.
Yes, absolutely.
Laios, we have to cook.
Cook, yes.
I'm pretty sure even Sung Won Cho did a reading of that.
Yeah, they're definitely the partners in crime, and there's, I don't know, the Marcilla on the outside, maybe being, I don't know, Skyler or whoever, and it's like, no, don't. I don't fucking know. But yeah, let's get to her, actually, because I can't hold off on talking about my favorite character for any longer.
Marcilla's a mood, isn't she?
Absolutely, and definitely my mood. Like, I totally can relate to her not being, like, super into it and just wanted to eat normal food. I get Laios' experimentation interest, and I would definitely be there and be like, yeah, I'll try it at least once. But he's just so into it and wants to get everyone else into it. And she's just, in the beginning, she's absolutely not having it. Later on, she is like more open to the idea, but she makes a hard cut at certain things like demi-humans, right? Like, nope, definitely not gonna have that. If it looks like a human, I'm not gonna eat it. Which is wise.
I don't blame her on that one, man.
Absolutely not. I mentioned this in the sneak peek. I love her reaction when she actually really enjoys something they cook up out of the fruits of a carnivorous plants, and she gets nerdy about how the sweet taste figures into it. And Laios is so happy that she shows interest in the topic of monster cuisine, which makes her recoil in fear and disgust because she doesn't want to become as creepy as him. It was amazing. Like, her reaction faces are some of the best things about the show. All of her jokes are the best in the show. Like, the gotta find a spell to turn back time reaction to the face pumpkin meal is probably my favorite. It's just so goddamn, like, so dry and gray and funny, and it's just a great bit of humor. And she just delivers all of that. And she's just, I feel like she's the most relatable character just in general. Shishak maybe being the next one to that, but he's more, snarky and brash and kind of cynical and everything and sarcastic. And Marcille feels a lot more earnest in her problems with certain things and her hold-ups and everything. And she, on the other side of the coin, she's a lot more optimistic. Like, she's definitely not the bravest or physically fit party member, but she's doing her best. And her magic is strong. Problem is, in the early levels of the dungeon, her strong magic is not really needed, so she feels like she isn't contributing and is way too eager to prove herself, which of course backfires to a hilarious degree, but also results, in a better meal on occasion, so there's that. And she's can be very headstrong and voices her opinion on a regular basis and everything. But she and Fallon, Laios' sister, became best friends in school. And Fallon actually taught Marcille a lot about dungeons, and I really like their backstory. It also takes the series a bit to get there, so it's a neat moment when you realize, oh, that's why the slightly cowardly lady that complains a lot is still such a diehard when it comes to getting Fallon back from the Red Dragon. For Laios, it's self-explanatory, but for her, this was the key moment where everything clicked for me. I was like, oh, that's why she's doing it, of course. Of course, it's her childhood friend, and it's the person that she's super connected to. And Fallon, on the other hand, who was a bit of an outsider the entire and connected to her, and just they have like this really, really strong bond and strong friendship. And of course, she wants to get her best friend back from the dragon, even if it means putting herself at risk all the time, and if she's not the most bravest person. But that made her super relatable and super sympathetic, and she's doing it despite, all the odds. And despite her, being not the best fighter and everything, I just liked her a lot. And, her clash with the orc leader, where they get into these heated arguments while making bread.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And eventually getting to an understanding of everything. And she just having these freak outs where she gets grossed out by bugs and stunts everyone as a reaction.
And it could have about that.
Amazing. And this could have gone a different way, and she could have been more of a snobbish character because she was an exceptional student and her mom is a court magician or something like that, right? So she's kind of like high class, whatever. But
maybe a little standoffish, but not to
an annoying degree, and also
not to an absurd degree now.
Yes, and she also feels very down to earth in certain aspects. I like that moment where she has to freshen up, and Senshi and Shishak want to get out because she says, like, I'm going to wash up and everything. She's like, no, you can stay here. I'm not going to get naked. I'm just going to, put the washing clothes in here and just rub the salt off a bit and the sweat and whatever. And that moment where she does a bit of self-narration there and talks to herself because she is thinking about something while washing herself was just such a real down-to-earth moment in a fantasy series and in an anime, and felt like made this character even more like, oh no, she's just a girl. She's just a down-to-earth girl who's trying to help out her best friend, and she's here. She doesn't like being here. She doesn't like to eat fucking monster food, but she's doing it to make this happen and get Fallon back. And in my opinion, she's obviously objectively the best character, even though she is sometimes a bit of a scaredy cat and not a fan of dungeon food, like I said. She's definitely trying to get over the adversities and everything and doing the best for Fallon. I loved her. I think Marcel is just fantastic. And, her power becomes more important later on in the series. She is doing something out of goodwill, because well-meant intentions and everything, good intentions. But that kind of backfires, and that kind of brings at odds with other characters. But still, you know why she's doing it and why the other characters blame her for that and everything. And I totally get it. It's not like, oh no, Marcel, what did you do? It's like, no, I get it. I get her. I understand why she's doing that and why she's so adamant of doing this, because she also has a different understanding of magic and everything. And it's probably going to get brought up again. It's going to be an important part when they, fight the Lord of the Dungeon eventually. So
a choice that she makes in the moment that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
To at least the viewer and the immediate party, but to everyone else,
yeah, they're not so happy about it, to put it lightly.
Which, to flip the coin, is also understandable.
Totally understandable. Yes, right. Because bad experiences and everything, but also I wonder, is not all of that like classic doctrine? Who's on the wrong here? Like, what is the background for this? Are the others wrong and Marcel is just naive? Or does she really have just a better understanding of magic and that's why she made that decision and is sure that it will work out in the end? We don't know at this point. We don't know if she was right, if it's something in the middle of these two positions. We'll see. So that's also really interesting, right? That's still a mystery that's gonna play out over the course of the next season, probably. So I like that. I like the nightmare episode of hers, which was neat and gave us a good insight into Marcel's feeling of guilt and everything. It was really good. And just that deeper character stuff, but also the goofy stuff. She's not like this super uptight person. She does a lot of goofy shit as well, not only as reaction to the goofy shit Laios and the other characters do, because she's kind of the straight woman here that they play off with their antics, and the straight man being Chilchuck. But also when she gets goofy, like the Skyfish, when she goes into full Skyfish mode in one episode, just fucking hilarious. And she's just fun. And another really fun detail about her that's just on a visual side and that I haven't seen, I think, in any other anime, she changes her hairstyles in pretty much every episode.
The only other character in all of anime I can remember that being actively pointed out was Haruhi, because she wore her hair a different style every day of the week. That
was actually part of the story for Haruhi, right? Because she would grab attention and everything. But in this, it's just a neat side thing. It's just like, it's her thing. She likes to change her hair a lot. They even talk about her hairstyle when they have the shapeshifter episode. And she's like, wait, no, but that's just my hair. I wore this already once, like a while ago, and yes, she did. She did in one of the previous episodes. Like, no, I did this. It's just I'm in the mood to wear this today. Why, right? And she has like a couple of different hairstyles. Some of those she goes back to, but maybe some of them only are shown in one episode or whatever. And that's going the extra mile from an artist's perspective, like having an extra character model in there just for a couple of episodes with a different hairstyle. That happens so rarely in anime. Yes, you have characters that change their hairstyle after an arc or whatever. Bulma in Dragon Ball also does this every time an arc is over. But not like in the course of one episode, like, and then next episode is a different style, and the next episode is a different hairstyle. I picked up on this, like, after a couple of episodes. Wait, is her hairstyle different every time? Yes, it was. Like I said, some of them are used several times, but it's still different in every episode.
I guess I wasn't so observant because I didn't notice it as much at first.
Yes, at first me neither, but after I was like, wait, this is happening. So it's really cool. And they always look great. Like, they always fit their character. And yes, really cool shit. Just like Delicious in Dungeon, showing you that Trigger is going for the extra details here and putting a lot of work into the little bits that are super fun. And yeah, Marcelo is one of those characters, both in the character development department, but also in the visual department, that emphasizes that. And so, yeah, loved her. Love the other characters too, though. Senshi is super fun. John, want to tell us a bit more about him?
Senshi is a gruff old dwarf who's trying to make a living out of eating the monsters in the dungeon, and he sort of helps to maintain parts of the dungeon's
ecosystem.
The ecosystem's a good word.
He considers himself a caretaker of the dungeon's ecosystem.
Yeah, and he outwardly says that because there's certain things that he does, he takes care of. Like, there's like this golem that he tends to every so often. He uses it to plant vegetables, but also make sure that it's tended to and taken care of. And he says that a lot of the monsters are meant to be like a balance so that they don't wander into I guess you could use the word biome, into biomes that aren't their own, where they would be subject to danger, or where it's like some of the stronger ones might go up further and might make it more dangerous for the people trying to traverse it. So he's very mindful of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like I said, he has extensive knowledge of how best to cook and eat a lot of the monsters, and he imparts a lot of that information onto Laios as the story goes on. And we find out a bit further in that he kind of has gone through some stuff.
Oh yeah.
But on the front of it, he comes across as just being very, he's
single-minded, I would say.
Yeah, single-minded is a good word. He wants to maintain the dungeon ecosystem. He's also interested in finding out what different monsters taste like, but there's the one in particular. What does a red dragon taste like?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I got, that they just needed a main motivation for Senshi to join the party, because technically where he was happy. So considering cooking red dragon is Senshi's main goal here, at least for a while, I expected the show to make a bigger deal out of him, actually being able to maybe fulfill his wish/mission. But, when we get to that, which, yes, spoilers, but of course that's what the series builds towards, that meal feels pretty much the same as all the others in terms of presentation and emotional moment and whatever. But then, what you mentioned before, he went through some stuff, and I guess the big emotional meal for him is reserved for the penultimate episode, where we learn about his origin story, which is pretty dark, but it leads to the aforementioned nice emotional moments. So there's that, and I was surprised that the red dragon meal wasn't that, right? That was his big holy grail, his white whale, for a reason. Why is he so intent? Why is that the thing that I never tasted this, and this is so important to me, and so on. But it's just that. And even then, when they eat it, he's not like, oh my god, this was worth all the effort and everything. It's just another meal. So I'm a bit surprised how low-key they were about it, considering that was his main motivation for a while. But again, there's another meal that's more important.
I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense in a way to me, because he keeps, even though Senshi is helps out the others. He's generally pretty good natured. He keeps to himself a lot.
Yes.
So for him to sort of keep that, under wraps because of all the stuff he went through in the past, it makes, I don't know, I guess it sort of works for me, but I could see why you would say, it's sort of
he needs, at that moment he still needs some time to come out of his shell. That was not the big emotional thing. I mean, it's not like he's completely standoffish with the other characters in the beginning, or it's like, I don't care about you, I'm just with you because of I want to eat the dragon meat or stuff like that. He very much learns about there's a lot of interaction with in the party, and them learning to know to interact with each other in general. Like everyone has their job and field of expertise, and then she starts integrating Cookie into everyone's speciality. For example, he uses Chilchuck's knowledge of traps to help him prepare food, like finding boiling oil or using a blade trap to cut a big chunk of bad meat. And that affects the other characters, because that means Senshi learns about using traps and Chilchuck learns about cooking. Everyone then benefits from this partnership. And, I like the party scene growing together in that way. And Senshi is kind of a catalyst for a lot of that. We have Marcel making soap from the fat of the kelpie, and Senshi letting her clean his hair with it because she put so much work into it at some point. And, now her support magic works better on him. They can walk over water and everything. So that was a nice moment. And that is something that we don't see in the beginning because, like you said, Senshi is used to being mostly to himself. And he has to first learn how to rely on others, how to consider the feelings of other people, and how to interact with them properly. And, that's one of his big character flaws. Like, he is strong and very knowledgeable in monster cuisine, but he is not really into risk management.
I mean, yeah.
He's like, I know it's dungeon. I'm not into complicated stuff. And which means he clashes with Chilchuck in the beginning a lot, who is all about identifying traps and avoiding them. And then the others don't necessarily take the ecosystem of the dungeon into consideration. And doesn't like that, and he also is no fan of magic, because in his opinion it makes things too easy. In his eyes, you lose perspective and appreciation for certain things when being able to solve every problem by just slinging a spell. And there's some people in the real world who would say, hey, if you want to eat meat, you should maybe be able to slaughter a pig or a cow or whatever, because just buying it from the supermarket makes you lose the connections to what that actually means. And see that perspective, and Senshi is kind of like falling into that.
I just found the whole magic angle with him sort of interesting because, classically speaking, dwarves are resistant to magic, like as in it has less of an effect on them, which is something that goes back to like Dungeons and Dragons and whatnot. So the fact that the magic that Marcel used on him to be able to walk over the water was only more effective after she had helped wash his hair and beard, because I guess that was like the best conductor for it.
Hair is a big catalyst for magic, as we learn. Marcel uses her own hair to cast some spells on certain characters, like the Cabro's party, right? When she heals them or whatever. She uses her own hair, I think, and that's how they find out that this party had some interaction with them, I think. So hair is very important, and Senshi is a big old dirty, small old dirty man. Like he's very much just has very, very dirty hair, and that's why when it's needed, suddenly in one episode, Marcel's magic doesn't properly work on him. You're right. That's really interesting. Again, good world building when it comes to the races that are present in the show, the different ones, right? And how they differentiate from each other in certain character traits, but also in certain body traits and what they can do and what they can't do. And but they find a way around that, which I mentioned before, like the soap thing. And Senshi actually appreciates it. He learns to appreciate magic or certain aspects of magic after a while. He's not the biggest fan of it, but after a while, he finds out there is a certain use for some of it. Certain use for certain tools that Chilchuck uses. He he was not interested in that. And for Senshi, it's mostly like opening up his. For the others, it's opening up their eyes to the dungeons, to the dungeon, and learning about its different biomes, about the different world, the monsters, and what they can offer them, and how they work, and how they interact with each other, and everything, and getting knowledgeable about them. About that, for Senshi, since he spent a long time in this dungeon, it's about learning the things the outside world has to offer. His life in the dungeon, and also benefiting from that, and having the monsters and the ecosystem. So it's all about exchange and learning from each other, which was pretty cool. I like that a lot. So yeah, cool character again. The last of the main bunch is Chilchak, which I feel like doesn't necessarily go through as much development as Senshi and Marcel.
Yeah, I feel like we don't really we learned a little bit about him, but definitely not as much as any of the other characters. But that might come in the next season. So
we learn he's technically an old man. Like, he's 29, which is like, what you just said, before. But the different lifespans, people, because we have different races, and those they age differently. Humans, Torments age like humans. Dwarfs have 2.5 times the lifespan of a human. Halffoot, like Chilchak, usually only have a lifespan of about 50 years. So with 29, he's getting there, right? So, and elves usually live for about 500 years, so definitely not as long as in Frieren, but still, Marcel, I don't even know if they say how old she is at some point.
Apparently she is 50.
Okay, so she is still pretty young. But yeah, so Chilchak is kind of an old man. I think at one point we learn he has a family outside of the dungeon. It's just on the side info. It's not made a big deal about that. We don't see a flashback to that really or anything, but I think he has a wife and 2 daughters or something. So, but he, because of the way he looks and the way he talks, he feels like this young, cynical or sarcastic person who is always annoyed if people don't listen to his instructions, because he's the tactics guy. He's the guy who knows all about the traps, all about lockpicking, all about avoiding danger and everything. So, he has his clashes with Senshi, and he has his clashes with Laios, who's always going out of the way to find new monsters. And it's like, no, that's not what we want to do. We want to avoid them. God damn it. And so yeah, that's of course fun, but that's mostly his job in the party. And in terms of the show, is being like the straight man who complains about the other characters doing dumb, goofy shit, and him not doing that so often. I mean, he has also some stupid things happening to him, like he has trouble with mimics, but who doesn't? Frieden can also sing a song of that. But he more so for different reasons and everything. But he has still goofy parts, but he's the straight man in this group, and he's always like, God damn it, why do I have to take care of all these children doing dumb shit? And it feels like that. So that's his main role here. I feel like aside from that, there's not that much happening with it in him in this season yet. But that could still come. And he's still an integral part of the party, both in terms of skill set, but also, sometimes doing some exposition, but also in terms of reactions to, like I said, all the nonsense that is going on around him. So it's very enjoyable. And, in the battles, he's mostly like, I'm gonna run away because I cannot really contribute to this.
Discretion is the better part of valor.
Yes, but also that also does its part in certain. So it's cool. Yeah. And outside of those 4, we have a couple of interesting side characters. Of course, there's Fallon, Elias' sister, who's mostly around in background stories, right? That of Masil, for example, and a bit of other stuff. Because, the main motivation of our party, of course, she can't be around too much in this season. And then we got some other characters, other people like, the gnome, I forgot his name, who's another party who becomes a bit more relevant in terms of lore and exposition later on, and politics. There's Kabru, he's like, what is he?
I
He's a
think
human as well,
Kaburo's
right?
tall. I think he's a tall man.
He's a tall man, right? And he was this other party, the party that gets constantly killed that we mentioned at the beginning. But he's like this. His motivation is mostly like he wants to destroy the ruler of this dungeon and thus keep the monsters from spilling out at a certain point, because that's what happened on his islands, and had a lot of all of the people he knew, or a lot of the people he knew, killed and everything. So that's his main goal, and that might eventually interfere with our main party's goals. We'll see. I can see Fallon figure into that on the opposing side, and them having to fight Kabru eventually. He's also a bit of, I don't know, he seems to be a nice guy generally, but there are these moments in this story where he seems very, very like sober, cold-blooded when it comes to killing certain people, when it seems to dishing out his own brand of justice.
Yeah, there's something bubbling just under the surface.
Yeah, something very callous and ruthless about him in certain moments that makes you feel like not entirely comfortable with this guy. Like, he feels like he has good intentions, but it feels like he will go to certain lengths to achieve his goals that might not be super nice.
Yeah.
And that comes across in certain moments. He's not like a guy that is sitting on his prejudices and everything. Like, he's got a certain opinion in the beginning about Laios and his sister, and he changes that. Like, he switches he switches, and he accepts that he had a wrong impression about Laios in the beginning, and he changes his opinion on him. So he's not like completely narrow-minded or anything, but in regards to his motivation, he's just like as this paladin-esque like super knight in a certain way that is in it for not the money like most of the other people who are going into the dungeon. Like, they just want to loot it, ransack it. He's in it for the long-term goal. He wants to help the people outside of the dungeon by destroying the person that is causing all the bad stuff happening in the dungeon, all the monsters to appear and everything. So he's a kind of a noble goal. The problem is, when it comes to other people interfering with that, he is probably not gonna make this let this be up for discussion. So
yeah, he won't abide people getting in his way.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure it's gonna take up an antagonistic role eventually. We'll see. Right now he isn't. He's gonna be part of the party, I think, eventually. At least this was teases. At the end there might be, but also not. He's still around though.
I wonder about that.
Yes, he's definitely one of the most interesting characters when it comes to the prospect of future seasons, to see where he goes and where his character arc goes. Because right now it's just a wild guess where he will actually end up when it comes to the relation to our party.
Like, I feel like there's two other characters who would probably join before he does, but I could also be way off.
No, I'm pretty sure I know what you're talking about, and just because of their history with our main party, I would agree to. Absolutely. So,
I am willing to be proven wrong at any point.
Absolutely.
So.
And by the end of the show, we also get another faction that is playing into this, which are the Western Elves, which of course also will play into Marseille's story probably eventually when they encounter them, who are intent on leveling the dungeon, which Kabru is trying to convince them to not do that and to seal it instead, because leveling the dungeon means a lot of the monsters will spill outside and will kill a lot of people. So he wants to, the elves will kill the monsters too, but, a lot of people in that conflict will lose their lives. And they're just more, they're about the blunt hammer approach, and he's more about the scalpel and going into the dungeon to the lowest level and beating the final boss, so to speak. So we'll see. But I think he convinces the elves to also get into the dungeon later on. We'll see. This is all interesting setup for the second season. And we'll see where this goes. We don't know that much about Izutsumi yet. the last party member of main group. We barely talked about her because there's not much to talk about her. I think she's part of Shuro's group first, right?
Yeah, she was one of his retainers, and
Yes.
then Shuro just was kind of like, "Hey, I think you should go with them." And Izutsumi is sort of like, "Fine."
And is he even saying that, or is she just running away and then joining up with them later? I'm not sure.
I I feel like that was part of it.
Okay.
Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but
I think she, because she's like this artificial beast man, she's not really necessarily fond of the country where she came from, because it feels like she is an experiment or whatever, an unwilling one. So maybe that will play into it, and we'll see if that story gets elaborated on later on. That sounded really interesting. But yeah, there's a nice moment between her and Marcel later on, like where they're hugging each other. Like they become pretty close pretty quickly, which is fun because Itsuzumi is like this. She's not a people person because she is a cat. Ha ha ha. But her interactions with the gang is with the rest of the party is more standoffish in the beginning, but later on, due to certain circumstances, she and Marcel get pretty close pretty quickly, and there's like a really nice tender character moment between those two. I think it's either the penultimate or the last episode, and I can see them having an interesting dynamic also in the future season and some stuff happening there. And yeah, looking forward to learning more about her character. And maybe seeing some more about Chilchuk's background and everything. I feel like I got a pretty good grasp on Marcel and Senshi and Laios at this point, but not necessarily those two. So let's see where this goes. Yeah.
Those three and Fallon, we definitely have learned the lion's share about. So
yeah. Which is funny because we haven't really spent that much time with Fallon herself yet, but we've heard so much about the other characters talking about her and seeing her in in certain background stories and everything, that it feels like we already know her a lot more than some of the other characters. Which is, it's also a good thing to do, right? That makes you care about them actually fulfilling their mission and getting her back. Because if she was just like this elusive thing, with like, oh, it's just Laios' sister, it's just Marcel's friend, then that would maybe not be enough to be that emotionally engaged in her story. But we see enough of her over the course of this first season where it's like, oh no, she seems to be a really cool person, and we definitely want to save her, like along with the party. So yeah, that was super cool. Trying to look at my random notes of cool things. Oh, I actually wrote great orchestral JRPG-ish soundtrack. I just didn't pick up that it was Mitsuda's style. So I picked up on the JRPG atmosphere, but I didn't pick up on it being Mitsuda.
Well, there we go.
There we go.
We both had the same thought, but didn't connect the dots.
Yeah, it's funny. Maybe quick mention about the fauna and the flora in the dungeon, which is really interesting. You have classics like man-eating plants, basilisks, and sea serpents, but you also get really offbeat stuff like the cleaners, who are these little microorganisms that repair damage in the dungeon. That's really fun. Then the paintings, who seem to be creatures themselves in a way. You get the living armors that are not really possessed armors, but actually have like these little mollusks attached to them, and that's why they move. And these mollusks have also their own ecosystems, ecosystem and everything. So
I thought that was really cool.
That was super cool. Yeah, these are the moments where you understand why Laios is so obsessed with it, because it's just a cool idea. And Senshi then finding out. It's still a bit weird that the first thing they then go to is like, oh, we found an interesting new creature. Let's cook it instead of studying it further or something like that in its natural habitat. But, that's what this show, that's the hook of this show. It's like, they're gonna cook fucking everything. And yeah, since I don't know, I mentioned this before, but people die in this show, so there's a surprising amount of gruesome, gory deaths. Them, being able to revive usually everyone, it feels like that's why they were able to put this in here without, killing the mood as well. But there's like one particular battle in the last quarter of the show where it's just, Jesus, I did not expect that much blood in this show. They went really wild.
It gets to be a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Still a lot of nice details aside from Marcel's hair. Like the party is doing something from the second opening that helps them in an actual fight later on, which I didn't pick up on when watching the OP. And then, oh, that's what they're doing. Oh, interesting.
Mhm.
They just do that in a lot of anime openings. Them holding each other at the hands, and then in the show they do like where they have a monster slip through that, and then being disenchanted, right? But the holding each other's hands in the is a thing that happens regularly in anime OPs, like them soaring through the sky and holding each other's hands in a circle. So I didn't pick up on that, and then they actually do that in the show, and actually has an effect in the fight, and it was great. So, and yeah, just the story being as good as it is, like I said, I expected this more of to be a slice of life affair all the way through, but I really got pulled in by the story. And of course, as expected from Trigger, the action and general presentation are just top notch. So that's really cool. I think the last thing, unless you have something else, John, that I need to bring up because it's the show it is. What of the monster foods, John, are the ones, or is the one food item that you would like to taste yourself?
Oh man,
I feel like for me it would be skyfish and chips, if only because of the great name. But there were some other ones that looked tasty. What was the one that caught your eye specifically?
Oh man, there were so many. I don't know how I could pick one, but
Particular thing of meat or side dish that stood out because of the way it looked. Some seafood.
I seem to recall. Oh, what was it? I think it was like this giant frog meat that they made one time, and that looked really good. But I mean, I guess there's that, but there's so many others. Like when they had like the treasure bugs and they candied them.
Definitely. That was definitely the freakiest fucking monster designs and also meal they did. Was like, that is so fucking weird, but also really cool. Just monsters mimicking treasure. So, being their own kind of mimics. And then,
the fact that it's an extension of a mimic in a way.
Yes, and them then just turning into that into candy because diamonds, rubies, whatever. They already look a bit like clear sugar candy, whatever. And then Senshi throws the actual gems away. The fool, the absolute cantaloupe, and yeah, but that was fun, and
there was the times that they made like the ice cream or like the jar of candy as well. Those were pretty, just a little something sweet on the side too. There's a lot, man. There's a lot of good looking food in this show.
They do some omelet stuff. They do some pancake stuff, and yeah, it's cool. It's cool stuff.
It brings to mind in particular, if you've ever played Dragon's Crown, and you see the meals that you can buy in the tavern before like going out on adventures and fighting bosses. It's like that. Like it looks decadent. It looks so good.
Yes. Food Wars also comes to mind, of course.
True.
Although there is no people losing their clothes over the food in this one.
True.
But yeah, that's definitely that felt very familiar when that game and that anime. That's revisiting that feeling, absolutely. But yeah, I thought the show was great. It seems like you feel the same, John.
It was fantastic.
Really good time. 2 course shows, so not too short, like 24 episodes, but it went by pretty quickly. And we're getting a second season, so that's pretty damn good. John, where can people watch the first season?
It's available to watch on Netflix. And it is available. They are simul-dubbing it as well. So, and aping a little bit off of one of ProZD's videos that he made recently, but I don't watch a whole lot of dubs. But but no, the whole cast in the dub was really great, and you and I talked about it privately, but it was nice to see that like a lot of the Japanese community was like, yeah, no, the voices are like really in line with what we imagined, they would be too. So, it was cool to see a lot of agreement on both sides about it.
Yeah, and considering that it's more technically a Western-ish RPG design thing going on there in certain parts, at least when it comes to classic, appealing to the classic Dungeons and Dragons formula and crowd, maybe in certain aspects, and maybe monster designs in certain parts, and the races and all that are available. Maybe consider watching it in English instead, because it feels like appropriate also with the names of the characters and everything. Could be, you could do that. I mean, I of course watched it in Japanese because I watch all anime subbed usually, but I feel like this would be one of those, or just like the anime that are set more in the Western Hemisphere of our world, that it might warrant checking out the English dub, because it feels like, oh yeah, this feels like maybe a series that would benefit from having that language as the language that you listen to while experiencing the show. So
I think I've said this before, but I'm kind of glad that we have moved past the point of like 90s dubs being questionable, and to the point that the production value and the cast and crew, like the feeling that there's a desire to elevate the experience is definitely there. So like, again, same as you, don't watch a whole lot dubbed because most of it is just simulcast and subbed, but like this Kaguya-sama Oshinoko, I think, and I haven't gone back to check it out, but I think Nokotan has a simul dub on Amazon.
Interesting. I wonder.
Which I wonder how well some of the jokes carry over. But I also kind of want to check it out at some point just to be like, huh, okay, because I saw some clips and it does go a little crazy as you would expect. But I'm glad we are at that point where it's like, the dub can be just as good. It can be an equally valid choice.
All right. Then I say dungeon food. Oh, dungeon food. But there's still one thing we have to do. Best of the season. So yeah, best of the season, of course. Now, since we only had 2 episodes this season, only 3 reviews, the selection is not as broad. I don't know. John, why don't you start us off with what was your pick this season?
Oh, brother. Well, I only have really 2 shows out of the full reviews I did. Like, I touched on some quick in the dead zone. There was a couple other shortish things I watched, but those, it's hard to give stuff like that or to returning shows because they already had their time to shine. So I liked that Demon Slayer finally gave us time to actually breathe. I actually really appreciate that. So I feel like I could pick it just on that merit alone. And we got to know some of the Hashira, and it was just, a lot. There was good exposition that didn't feel overbearing in it. But then we had Delicious in Dungeon, which had so many great characters and a lot of, just incredible world building, and food all looked really good, man.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely. Don't watch that show on an empty stomach, people. That's a bad idea. Just like with Food Force, don't do it. It's gonna hurt you. And when you're on a diet currently, definitely don't watch this show. It's not gonna make you happy. Absolutely not. Yeah.
So I feel like, I would give it to Delicious in Dungeon just by that little bit. Because, I mean, Demon Slayer is coming back for probably 2 more runs, if I had to guess. I mean, we have the movie trilogy that's coming up, and then not sure if they're going to tie that in with like the final arc that comes after that. But
I wonder. I mean, it sounds like from the name of the movies, it's just gonna be the penultimate arc, like the one
Mhm.
before the final arc, just the Infinite Castle, but also maybe not like you said. I'm not sure, actually.
It'll have time to come back. So will Delicious in Dungeon. It's possible it could win again, but we don't like to give repeats around here too often. So I feel like D&D. Oh my god, I just got it. Oh my.
Wow. I had not realized this before either.
It was a
Oh
good show.
no.
It was a good show. Please watch it. What's your pick? I'm gonna go jump off a roof.
Please don't. Still need my co-host. Anyway, so regarding Demon Slayer, I liked the new season, but only really loved the final 2 episodes. Weirdly enough, Demon Slayer hasn't gotten any of our best of the season awards so far. I guess the previous outing probably would have had the best shot, but it had to contest with Vinland Saga Season 2 and Witch from Mercury, so tough luck there.
That's true.
Maybe Infinite Castle arc will finally be the one. We'll see. Loved a lot about it, Delicious in Dungeon, the world building, the characters, the production values, the story in itself. But as much as I love what it was giving me, it wasn't firing on all cylinders every episode as much as Kaiju number 8 was. It mostly was, but not as much. That can, of course, be attributed to it being more of a low-key show, and also the season having double the runtime of that of Kaiju number 8's first core. But regardless, Kaiju number 8 was the show this season that had me chomping at the bits for every new episode each week and had me wanting more after the end of each one. Of the characters, especially the main guy, one of the most sympathetic shonen mates in recent time, also the most relatable one for me personally, because he's a bit older than your usual shonen pro-tycoon. I dug the sci-fi setting, I dug the kaiju designs, the action, the visuals, the soundtrack, all seem to cater to me specifically, not just because I'm a hopeless shonen battle bitch, but also because all of it delivered that little bit of extra jolt that I didn't know I was looking for in that kind of show. So yeah, if you love your action and your big monsters and your 30-somethings that are trying to find their place in life and risking a fresh start, this is the shonen battle show for you, and it was for me, so I'm gonna pick that for my best of the season. Doesn't mean that I won't pick Delicious Dungeon in Dungeon when it comes back for the second season. We'll see. That's something to look forward to, definitely. And looking forward to reviewing that again with you, John. But I think that's it for now for this season. Short season, like I said, 2 episodes. But next season we have at least probably 3 for you with a couple more reviews. And of course, in the next episode, we will talk to you about the fresh new premieres from the fall anime season. So until then, since it's getting cold again, stay warm and enjoy the colder seasons.
Take care, everybody.
And that is a wrap on the 159th episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in this podcast is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jake Kaufman. Please go to virt.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. Find us where all the podcasts live, but also check out animebrainfreeze.com for our review index and more. Give us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice if you can. Follow us on the socials or send an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next episode. Macht's gut.
So long, everybody.
Next time on Anime Brain Freeze.
Oh dear. We seem to have really dug our hooves in on this one.
Yes, we've grown pretty fond of it.